Well, good morning, everybody. It's a really great pleasure to see so many um, governors here today and also my NED colleagues. This is the first meeting that I've chaired, and it is a real privilege. It's also, and I, you know, take no responsibility for this, but I think it's a really exceptional day for CCAM. I think we can say we are coming out of special measures, and I really want to say tremendous thanks to the CCAM people, and I mean that not just the executive and the senior managers, but it's everybody who has made a contribution to make sure that we are, as we should be, being seen to be a really good performing trust that puts patients at the heart of everything we do. And the other really positive news, and again, I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but we do have the results of our staff survey. And again, what I'm pleased to note more than anything is the level of engagement is much higher. And that says to me that our people are very open to having real and honest conversations with us about the future of CCAM and how we work together. But not only that, the scores show that we are very much moving in the right direction. So again, tremendous thanks from me to everybody involved in. I was talking to Janine this morning, our head of comms. She's made a sterling effort to encourage engagement, and tremendous thanks to her. But thanks to all of the people in the organisation. There is more to do. We are ambitious to continue to make this trust one of the best in the country, and really support Simon and the executive team to do that. And also, governors, you have an important role to play in this, and my thanks for that. Anyway, that's my introduction. I should start by apologies for absence. Simon is at a very important national meeting today, but I'm really pleased that Margaret, his deputy, is here, and hopefully will keep me in check as well. Nick Harrison, who is not here, Mark Rist, Ariel, who is one of our new governors, and Andy Erskine, who is also not here for very valid reasons today. I'd also like to make some welcomes who are coming to COG for the first time. I think I've met all of you, but tremendous welcome to Gary Richardson, who is Staff Operational Governor, Andrew Cuthbert, who is a Public Governor for West Sussex, also Aidan Parsons, Public Governor for Surrey, and Fran Pollard, Public Governor for Kent. You've all completed your two-day induction programme, one with us, one with NHS providers. But real great thanks for you joining. I know you don't get paid for doing this, so you do it out of the goodness of your heart. And I do recognise that it consumes some of your time. And so thank you to you and your families, but also to really say it is really important that you tell it as it is. You speak to us with honesty and openness, and you are very much our eyes and ears within the organisation. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy your time with CCAM. Anyway, that's my opening welcome to you. And then go on to check whether there are any declarations of interest. I assume that's no. Minutes from the previous meeting. Can I ask for confirmation or any amendments that people want to propose? No? Okay. Can I have somebody who would propose the minutes? Yeah, thank you, Harvey. Thank you. Anybody want a second? Yeah, thank you, Kirsty. That's great. So we can take those minutes as approved. Action logs. Anything we want to raise here, Peter?
There's no open actions on the log, Chair.
Okay, that's brilliant. So if we can then go on to the Governor and Membership Development Committee. And I think that's Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, can I just pay tribute to Professor Usman Khan, who has relinquished his responsibility as Chair, and thank him on behalf of the Council of Governors for the effort that he put in the time he was with us, and wish him on behalf of the Council every success in his new role in NHS London. Secondly, could I welcome you, Michael,
Thank you. very
as
much.
Chair. The Council of Governors is very delighted that you were able and prepared to step forward and take on this role, and we're very grateful for you doing so and wish you all the success and our full support in your endeavours. The Council are very encouraged by the fact that the Trust is about to move out of RSP and echo the points that you made earlier. Having stolen that little bit of time, Chair, I'll now move on to what I was meant to be talking about, which is the Governor Membership and Development Committee. The Council considered whether it was appropriate to continue to maintain two committees, and we felt that it was really adding to the burden of our executive colleagues, and also it seemed to make no sense to have those two committees. So we concluded it was best to merge them into one. The papers are before the Council and those attending as the terms of reference, and we would like to take those as read unless anyone has any comments they wish to make.
May I ask for any comments? Thank you, Andrew, very much. Any comments?
So, assuming that there aren't any, Chair, then can we approve those, please? Nods and arms around the table. The only one point is obviously that these are to be reviewed every 2 years in point 10.2, and now they have been approved. I'm sure that the Secretariat will add the date for review. Thank you. Shall I move on to 53, Chair?
Please. Thank you.
The Governor Development Committee report is again before you. I think there are a couple of points that I would just like to draw out, if I may. Firstly, the Council of Governors would appreciate if non-executives are not able to attend, if we had a bit more than they're just not there, and we sort of understood a little bit as to why, because that would be helpful, and I think that's contained in the minutes. The annual members meeting is developing, and a task and finish group has been formed for that meeting in September. So that's, I think, encouraging, and I'm grateful to governors who have been prepared to step forward and offer their service to that committee. I'd also like, if I may, Chair, just to thank the governors for their diligence and their effort, and echo your comments in the fact that they have been prepared to put in significant time in attending subcommittees of the board and other things to try to ensure that we execute our duties in representing those that the Trust serves in an effective way. And I think I'm sure that the executive would echo that, the thanks to governors for their diligence. Those under item 53, Chair, are the only points I wish to make, unless anyone has any to ask me or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. An excellent report. So I take as very much on board your point about non-executive, non-attendance, and out of courtesy to this body, we will make sure that if non-executives can't attend, they provide a note in advance.
It is very difficult for governors to execute our responsibilities if we don't have the non-executive at the meeting.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I think governors understand that may be too difficult on occasion, but if not, then perhaps non-executives could make sure someone else is briefed to be able to pick up on any questions that the governors may have. That would be very much appreciated by the council.
We'll take that forward. And again, forgive me, I'm still learning in this, but I don't know if this is the appropriate point in time. But I would welcome governors' help in one particular area. So, as a board development day last week, we had an opportunity to consider diversity within CCAM, which is, I would say, we've got more work to do in that space. And I was fortunate earlier in the week, I was only there for one day of the 2 days, but this was the annual ACE, this is the annual ambulance conference in Leeds. Really pleased to see that Simon was there and was chairing the committee, the board the presentation and discussion on digital. And there was a considerable number of our executive colleagues there, which again reflected very well on CCAM that we were having a national voice, which I think is very important. But I was very struck, and Simon and I talked about this afterwards, in the afternoon there was a presentation by other ambulance trusts where they were talking about what they were doing to increase diversity within their organisations at all levels. Now, this is particularly challenging, but Simon and I felt this was one area where CCAM had got further to go. And now this is really difficult. I don't have any solutions, but I was interested in talking about the AGM and the more that we're trying to do to get people to come forward to be governors from different sections of the South East population, and also in our paramedic recruitment, which is not sufficiently diverse. I think this is a challenge for us as an organisation, and I would like to rise to that challenge, but it's not something that the executive, that any particular group within the organisation can solve. We are open to all ideas, so I would very much welcome in your committees as governors, you might think about that, what we might do. We very much welcome your insights, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Those are, I think, the 3 parts of the agenda that I had to report on, unless anyone has any other questions.
Questions, please? Okay, no. National Committee. People take the nominations committee as read, but any questions or whether you're happy with that? Okay, no, thank you. Thank you very much. And I should say that tremendous welcome to Liz, who is being appointed as Deputy Chair for the organisation. This is the right place to say that.
Yeah, well, there's a nice in part to make these.
Okay, thank you. Sorry very much. Sorry if I've jumped the gun there, but never mind.
You'll get it twice.
You'll get it twice, Liz. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, I think now we move on to over to you, Margaret, as update from the Chief Executive.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. And I'm delighted to be here with you all. First time here, but it's really good to see you. And hopefully I'll get to chat to some of you as we're milling around. I'm hoping we have a drink at some stage, so we'll talk then. So I'm speaking on behalf of Simon. He apologises for not being here. But I think just to explain what his absence is all about, it really is a reflection of the unprecedented times that the NHS finds itself in. I'm 42 years in the NHS. Some of you may have been here longer in the NHS, but this really is a first for everybody. So all chief executives and chairs, though Michael stayed behind to come here, are meeting with Jim Mackey and Amanda Pritchard, the outgoing chief executive of NHS England and the incoming chief executive today up in London, to discuss the plans. The first draft plans have been submitted, where we put forward where we believe we're going to end up financially at the end of March next year. And they've come in at billions over what was expected, billions, which isn't a tolerable position for the country. So they're meeting, and it was important that we released him to be there. So that means that I can be delighted to be here. So just to give you a little bit of a flavour of what's been going on since Simon last met you, clearly the good news is that we have exited special measures. So CQC came here, for those of you that have recently joined us, in February 22, and in May 22 put the organisation into what's called RSP4, so Recovery Support Position 4, which is special measures in the old money. And since then, the organisation, every single part of the organisation, including the governors, but every single member of staff has been working quite effortful, whatever that word would be, but with diligence to get ourselves sustainably and in a very long-term way out of special measures. And we got our letter 2 weeks ago to say we've succeeded in that. That means we still remain in what's called NOF 3, so we've come out from the top naughty step to the next one down. So there is still some oversight, and that oversight is very much focused on our HR improvement plan and on our engagement with trade unions. So that means we get some extra support from various people around the regional and the ICB space to continue our progress in those spaces. But overall, it's great news, and we're extremely thankful not only to each one of our colleagues who are involved in CCAM, but also to our partners. We have a very good relationship with our providers, and we are the only ambulance trust that is able to do the handovers into the hospitals from the ambulances at the time that is expected to by the national targets. Every other ambulance service struggles, meaning they have patients at the back of their ambulances for hours and hours and hours. We don't see that. It's an exceptional case when we have somebody remaining in our ambulance for more than an hour. But on the whole, the 15-minute and the 45-minute handovers happen. So we have to be grateful for the diligence of our partners, because it's really difficult out there. And that's one of the discussion points that will be happening today. How can we support each other as a system? We are committed to ensure continued improvement, and it's really important to say that. I think when the executive team heard that we were out of special measures, we patted each other on the back for 2 minutes, and then we were straight back seriously into the business. So we do have to remind ourselves to celebrate as well. But we are absolutely committed. We know we have a long way to go, and it's great that we're now able to be in spaces that we haven't had the capacity to be in before, one of them being the EDI space. And we are absolutely determined that in every aspect of our organisation we should be aiming for great and for outstanding, but not being arrogant in that. So we continue to seek that improvement. And that is linked to the work we've been doing in setting our priorities for this coming year. Some of you were involved in sessions we've held over the last months to focus and to develop what our priorities should be. We had a joint meeting, and there will be a joint meeting on the 24th of April when we'll be doing a final review of these with you. But we are beginning to crystallise now where our priorities should be. They are linked very much to the strategy. So the strategy we established last year, we're not forgetting that. It was a bit taken over a bit by bringing in the urgent care navigation hubs, which we did as the right thing to do to support our system over winter and make sure patients were safe. But we're definitely still on track to deliver on our strategy. So those priorities will be shared with you. But thank you for those of you that have been involved in with the work into that so far. Regarding planning, you will have Simon Bell join us in part 2, and he'll go through in more detail what we submitted in planning. The draft submission went in on the 27th of February, and the final submission goes on the 27th of March. What has been very clear from the centre is that in previous years, submissions would go in. There'd be about 40 different exchanges from then on till the final submission went in. What's been very clear is your first submission needs to be a realistic submission with proper plans behind it. So we have done that. And again, we've sought very wide, trust-wide views on this, holding a big conversation about a month ago with all of our staff to get both challenge, but also ideas, because this is about all of us putting our shoulders to the engine that will need to drive through this year to ensure we can deliver. So we have submitted a break-even plan. That is to achieve a 25-minute Category 2 mean. Those of you that know, the C2 mean target is actually 18 minutes, but nationally it was moved to 30 minutes last year. We reached that 30 minutes, coming just under. We've now been given a stretch target, but the expectation is that nationally all ambulance services hit the C2 of 30 minutes. In order to do that, those that achieved it last year are expected to achieve even better. So we have submitted a 25-minute C2 mean for 25-26, but that is underpinned by the following key deliverables. We can't do that by magic. So there is a £10 million efficiency programme that is in place internally that will be managed by our senior management group with the full support of the Executive Management Board, and we will be reporting that into board. We have an internal productivity programme which will deliver a 4-minute improvement on the C2 mean. That's such an easy statement to make, but the amount of work behind that and the amount of engagement we will have to have, particularly with our trade union colleagues, is significant to achieve that. And there is a system productivity programme too that we've put in a challenge, which means to get to 25 minutes, those last 2.3 minutes are dependent on the C2 mean. So therefore the 15 minutes and 45-minute handover into the hospitals. Now, that planning assumption also includes £10.2 million of nationally funded growth monies that we know we're going to receive. We'll be receiving half of that at the beginning of the year. The other half will be dependent on how we're meeting the trajectory. So that will be drawn down in September if we're able to meet that trajectory. Clearly, we will be working really closely with our system partners, and an example of that is we were invited to the Quality Summit held by Brighton Hospital this week, where we have partner responsibilities to ensure that they can manage flow and they can see patients through to be able to take our patients. Part of that is that we need to work on our alternative pathways, which again needs work with system partners. So we are working very hard in that space. On top of that, we are working with the SCAS team. A lot of us have just arrived back from Leeds. We arrived back last night, having spent 3 days at the Leadership Conference. And some of the executives and staff from SCAS, South Coast Ambulance Service, were also there. We were able to spend quite a bit of time with them, which was extremely useful. You'll know, all of you will know, things start with relationships, don't they? And it was a very helpful time to start aligning ourselves and our values and our thinking and our planning together more in the informal sessions than the formal sessions. David has now become the Joint Director of Strategy. Half his time he spends with us, half the time we've given him to SCAS. And I know already, he's only 3 weeks in, he'll be joining us in part 2 to describe what's been going on, but he's really made an impact. And they do see that the ball of energy that we've sent over there is really taking shape now. You can imagine for him it's a lot of learning and a lot to take on board. But we really do begin to see already in such a short time the benefits of that joint appointment. And then I thought we'd finish off, or Peter thought I'd finish off, just giving you some headlines of the staff survey. So today, the staff survey is released. It's been under embargo for like months, hasn't it? It's been very painful. But last week, we began to get some headline benchmark data across the sector, where we came out extremely favourably. Today, it's all released. So we're able to share, if we could share the slides, if you can accommodate this, I will just take you through some of the headlines. It is incredibly positive, and we actually felt as an executive team that this is more important to us than coming out of special measures, however odd that sounds, because this is all about the people. And, you know, the execs will come and go, but the people that work here own the organisation, and we need to know that the changes that are happening are being felt and delivered by them. So, take you through this. If we could have the next slide, please. So February 25, we received the updated report, and the sector benchmarking is the first time we've seen that. So we can see how we rate across the 11 ambulances. It's a very competitive lot in the ambulance service. We have been able to share the data internally, which has been happening over the last week. So each unit, it started with the operating units, received their own individual scores, and I can tell you every single unit has improved. That's really, really important. There are clearly some units that have stayed the same in some areas and some have gone down in some areas. But the overall headline is that they've all improved, with some improving across every single score. The corporate teams received their scores this week. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So we had a 67% response rate, the second highest, so not high enough for Janine standards. Now, we will have to work really hard to get a higher score than that this year. You can imagine the amount of work that went to get a 67%. That means 3,500 of our staff responded, so this is really significant. And the improvement in our response rate compares favourably, which has declined. So interestingly enough, our responses are going up, but overall in the sector, the responses have been declining. I don't quite know what that's about. Happy to share these slides when we finish, by the way, because I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see there. But our organisation is the top line, 66.64%. The best was 71.9. Today we'll find out who that is. We haven't been able to find out yet. But the average was 49.3. So we were well above average. And we know that that is likely to be well above average than any other healthcare provider in the country. So we need to be proud of that fact alone. People are engaging with us. Thank you. So we have performed above the sector average in every single one of the 9 themes. I have to smile when I say that. And we were the top scoring one for morale. So if anybody says we can't get any worse than this in our morale, it really isn't true. You know, this is the top scoring of any score we've had in staff surveys in the past. And we've seen statistically, so these aren't just improvement, they are statistically significant in every theme. Now, for some of us, we look at some themes more weightily than others. So speaking up, Siba and I would say are probably some of the most important themes, because where we have speaking up, we can aim for great civility, and it's incivility that causes terrible problems for our culture. So you'll see there that we are the gold line, of course, and you'll see there how we compare favourably across all of these. Thank you. So some positives from that then, and it is worth going through these in a little bit more detail. Care of patients, top priority. That's, of course, very, very important to me as the chief nurse. There's been a 5% improvement compared to last year and 2% improvement compared to the rest of the sector. So it's up 10% since 2021. I would recommend my organisation as a place of work. That's a really important one, because that's a really difficult thing to say across the whole NHS at the moment, and has been for a number of years. And yet we've seen a 6% improvement in that. And again, an improvement of 3% compared to the sector. I feel safe to speak about anything that concerns me. For those of you that were here last year, we made a statistically significant improvement in that last year. This year is exactly the same. There's been a 6% improvement. And again, it's better than the sector change, which has actually deteriorated on the whole, and we are above the average. And how many times have we been the subject of unwanted sexual behaviour? Again, one that's very close to my heart. There's been an improvement of 1%. Now, we know this is a very unreported area, and we are seeing reports increasing now, which is a good thing, because you can't tackle stuff you don't hear about or know about. But we are the best score in the sector. Now, when I say that best score, we don't say that with arrogance. All it's saying is that we're on the right path, and we just need to keep on diligently going through that path, but keep on talking to people. And I've been very, very grateful to Angela, who has been involved in conversations with us in relation to students. So, you know, we just need to keep going at these things. And areas for focus for us then. So these were the 2 areas that came up as being worse from last year, and you'll notice there's a societal shadow over this. On what grounds have you experienced discrimination in relation to ethnicity? There's been a 5% deterioration, and we are aware of notable hotspots. None of it was a surprise to us. I will tell you what we're doing on that in a minute. On what grounds have you experienced gender discrimination? Again, a 3% deterioration on that. And again, there is variation by area. And then the second area was about the experience of physical violence from patients and service users, 3% deterioration. That is a national trend, unfortunately, for all these things. So it is not only sector-wide, it's across the whole of the health and social care landscape. So, you've heard we saw our best response, but we need to be explicit with the organisation, otherwise we won't do as well or even better next year. So so our people and us, we responded to, need to see that we're doing something with this information. We've asked on the back of that for the local areas to really look into their own spots and work with their teams. So we're all meeting all our directorates in the next few days now to go through these scores and get a bit of a richer understanding of where they've come from. So we're doing that dual approach of looking at it locally, but then we are going to be looking at the trust-wide themes. So we already know that EDI is one of our trust-wide themes, and violence and aggression, we're actually working with the whole sector on that one. Thank you. So the dual approach, local, that's on the right-hand side to me and to you, the posters that have gone around to every single area. They have also had more detailed breakdown. You'll see that's the result for Banstead, actually, where there was a 74% response rate from their local teams compared to 67% last year, well above the average of the organisation. And you'll see in each of those coloured boxes the arrow going up. So every one of their scores have gone up. That gives them details of the difference in the scoring. But it also, in the green and the blue box on the right-hand side, gives an idea of the most improved area, but also the one that requires the most improvement compared to trust, but also to their scores last year. So that's just to give an immediate, people like, we're in that society now where we like grabbing information immediately and working with it, processing it. So that gives that immediate fix. But as I say, they're also getting the very detailed responses. So the local leaders have been made responsible to share the results and be very open about them, to engage the teams and identify just 2 or 3 areas that they're going to focus on, and we'll be sharing those across the organisation in the next weeks. What we don't want is a whole plethora of action plans. There is no point in that. We really want to focus. We've learnt our lessons in CCAM, 2 or 3 things mostly, and then support will be wrapped around as it's needed. Corporately, we're going to stop doing the kind of sheep dip approach and look at pan-trust themes. But we are triangulating data now from other areas such as FTSE and ER into those hot spots that the staff survey have identified, and setting up organisational change processes into those areas to support them, because this isn't about those local teams or those local leaders. It's about the way the organisation has set the structure up for them to either succeed or to fail. So we are taking that responsibility really seriously. So next steps, we're doing triangulation from April. We're checking in June. That's our first check-in on the local actions, and we'll also share the comms trust-wide. The pulse check survey, of course, comes in July, and then we will follow up with a second check-in in September to go into our pre-survey plan and help us rally the troops so we get even more numbers feeding into next year. And then October, November is the staff survey again. So we really only have a short period of time to respond and let our people know that we're listening and we're acting. I hope that was helpful and not too much detail for you, but these are the news that are more important to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Genuine thanks from me to the executive colleagues. I know this is an organisation-wide, but I do think it's a testament to the leadership of the organisation and how it's developing. So thank you. Can I open the floor to any questions? Margaret introduced a range of issues. So yeah, Peter, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. My question is to any of the NEDs or all of the NEDs to respond. Generally speaking, an encouraging result from the staff survey, and I note that you're triangulating that with other data. There wasn't any mention there of the data with all the kind of qualifications we might put on it from the recent GMB survey, which seems to paint a very different picture. And I think governors are rather concerned that there's a bit of a mismatch here. So could I hear from the NEDs whether you're assured that that data, with all its caveats about it, is also being taken into account going forward? Thank you.
I will ask the NEDs to answer that, but I would like just Margaret to say as well. Do you mind? Because you know a bit more of the background to that than we do, but please.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. We are very much looking at all sources of data, and one of the good things about having the different exec portfolios coming together on this, which we're all taking equal responsibility, is that we're all able to bring data from our regulatory bodies, as well as from surveys and from findings of other sectors as well. So that would include then the stuff coming in from the GMB. We're only aware of the survey results that they have shared with us. We obviously don't have access to everything, but we will be getting the input, and of course we'll be working with our trade unions in setting out the plans and checking that they are falling in line with things they're hearing and seeing. So with the data we have available to us, we definitely will be triangulating.
You asked of the NEDs and the assurance, but somebody can ask you as People Committee, please. If you
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Peter. It's a really good question. We did talk about this at the last People Committee, what the survey told us. And I think the information that we have at the moment, and Margaret can confirm, is that that survey was a much smaller group of people. However, you know, I don't think the committee wanted to dismiss it because it did highlight some key issues and we should take those on board. So whilst I think these staff survey results are very positive, I think we just need to bear in mind that there are still some key issues that we need to address. And clearly some of that is shown in the data around grievances and disciplinaries. And so we did talk a little bit about that and some of the issues that come up through those ER cases. And just as an example, there's been historical pay issues around the ECSWs, and that has been resolved, but that was responsible for about 31 grievances. So that gives you a flavour of the impact of certain issues on the number of ER cases that we have to look at. But as far as the issues in the survey are concerned, not ignored at all, but put into context in terms of the number of people who responded to that survey and the wider organisational results.
Thanks to Margaret and Sibu. Can I add, I would agree with both of them. What I would say is, I think we need to look at all data and give you assurance as a board that we are doing that and we'll triangulate, as Margaret said. The second point I'd say is it's really important that we focus on systemic issues. So I think where you see issues being raised in staff surveys and by the unions, they're often symptoms of something that needs to be sorted. And for me, the golden thread here is improving management and leadership within the organisation. And that's why the board fully supports Simon and colleagues about what we are trying to do in terms of establishing appropriate leadership and management competencies. And that means that listening to people, dealing with issues. I would finally conclude with saying is, I think we do need to recognise that the staff survey has been done for a number of years. It is quite comprehensive. It covers the full organisation. I don't know the depth of the survey by the staff side, really respected, but I would highlight Subu's report, which is around about the numbers are more limited. But that doesn't mean to say that we don't take it seriously, and we will continue to do so. So, Martin, I hope that gives you the assurance that we are looking at that. Okay, thank you. Kirsty, I think you were next.
So, thank you. My question, it follows on from this discussion actually. So, I think we're aware that there are ongoing issues with our trade union colleagues, and Gary is going to come in with an example to some extent to support some of that thing. But I think we're concerned as staff governors that things are not happening because of that relationship, and at what point are we going to... We've tried to repair that relationship. We just want some assurance that actually that is a concentration, and Margaret, you alluded to it anyway, because of the NOF3, that the trade union working is there, and actually that's nice to hear because I hadn't heard it previously. But I think for us as staff governors, there's things that our people want to do but can't do because the relationship with our trade union partners is not working as it should do, and we're just asking for some assurance that actually we do have some concentrated effort on it. But I'm going to bring Gary in with a specific example because it's really clear.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. So this relates to our colleagues within our control rooms trying to that have unanimously voted as a workforce to amend some of their rota patterns. This meeting's meant to have taken place 3 or 4 times now with our trade union colleagues as part of Quoracy. That meeting's not happened, and that's now affecting 500-600 members of staff by not being able to progress that. So as Kirsty said, it's the reassurance around and the board assured that there is something happening in the background to support our staff to ensure that we are able to move through with policies and changes that our staff do want.
Really, really important questions, and it comes back to my theme is you're telling us stuff, which is really excellent. But Margaret, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Kirsty and Gary for that example. we are determined to progress the business alongside becoming an exemplary partnership organisation. So that is the mission statement. Now we are at the point of recognition that as long as we have done everything reasonable, so I would say setting up 4 meetings is probably quite reasonable, then we just continue with business. Now that requires a consistent approach in everything, doesn't it? It requires really clear expectations and really clear lines in the sand, which are both being articulated and written and are being drawn. And so it will be a slow process. What we're dealing with here is decades of entrenched and allowed behaviours that have happened to protect the organisation, actually, in a very pervasive way. So we need to both respect that. You know, our colleagues from staff side are here to represent and protect staff, and we absolutely respect that. It's a difficult job. And I think the things that we've been dealing with, certainly I've only been here 2.5 years, are things they've probably been shouting about for a lot longer. So in holding that respect, we are also making sure we're really very clear. We're being very reasonable as exec team and as a board, and but there is business to be landed. So very happy to pick that up outside of here, of course. I wouldn't talk about operational matters here, but as long as we have shown that you know, everything has been done to show reasonableness, business does have to continue. We have patients to care for.
Can I say, Kirsten Garrick, that is what Margaret has said. It has the full support of the board and the non-executives. This is an important thing that we need to resolve with proper process, but recognising that you know, no one group of people can determine how we act and how we go forward. We are very committed to equity and all of those particular principles, but we do need to take the organisation forward. May I ask, does that give you the assurance that you're looking for?
Yes, it does. I think it's just been going on. So, Margaret, you've alluded to it. It's been going on for so long. I just feel that perhaps, you know, there comes a point, which is what you've said, is actually the business of the organisation needs to continue, irrespective of the other things that are going on. Yeah. And actually, that is a perfect example of we should just continue, because actually our people want it. And if 94% of them want it, then actually we should be doing it. Okay. But yes, it does give me some assurance.
But I would ask that, you know, our next meeting, you come back on this, you know, because hopefully you will see progress. But, you know, as I said, you are eyes and ears, you're one source, but we want to hear from you. So thank you for raising that. Thank you. Any other questions of Margaret at this point? Oh, sorry, Andrew, yes, please.
I think you did cover this briefly, Margaret, but is the paper work that's associated with this result going to be distributed to Council of Governors, both the presentation you've made, but also I think previously we've had the link directly to the staff survey, so that in fact people can you know, look at that in some detail should they wish for the granular version.
Yes, absolutely. So Janine's with us in part 2, so we can definitely make sure she gets that message, Andrew.
Many thanks.
Thank you for getting that. Okay, unless, yes, please. Thank you.
It's the end of the financial year coming up, and looking at the next 3 papers on the agenda raise a question in my mind. I assume there is in place a formal process for evaluating the strategic transformation plans and the operational plans within the strategy. And I'm really looking for assurance that that structured process has the right breadth so that it can ask the question, is the strategy still moving in the right direction and aims, and has sufficient depth? Because if you look at the next 3 papers, there's a lot of stuff that should have been met by Q4, and if they haven't been met, as is the structure, will it allow it to adjust plans appropriately? And in particular, coming from Surrey, I'd be quite interested to see whether the virtual hubs in Banstead and Tongham are fully contributing to that strategy.
Can I answer that question and I'll ask Margaret to come in, and we will touch on it, as you quite rightly say, in the more detailed reports from my colleagues who are chairs of the various committees. I would say as chair that I am confident that that we are moving forward with the strategy. Is it easy to do? No, within the financial constraints that the NHS faces as a whole. But I was previously, before I took this chair, a member of the Finance Committee, and Howard will speak when it comes to his item. But we are scrutinising in some depth the plans that the organisation has, not just for year 1, but year 2 and year 3, and how that is resourced. I would say that the feedback that I get from, in the early days of my tenure here, from the chairs of the ICBs, there is a lot of support for the progress that has been made, particularly over the winter months with the clinical hubs. And we have in place an evaluation programme that will report in the early summer on some of the work around the navigation work that we're doing. It's a really good question that you ask, and what I'm very much in favour of is an agile organisation, an organisation that is, has the ability to change and redirect if it needs to, but against a framework that is giving us good evidence that the strategy is working or not. So I am confident that we're getting the right information. I think we should go through the individual reports and come back to your question at the end. But Margaret, would you like to add anything, please?
Yes, I mean, I think that's the kind of question we should be asked all the time, because it is the thing that keeps us on track. But we have been not surprised. We have met the strategic aims for this year. Remembering we started with year 1, we didn't have a year 0. So we set our strategy planning a year 0, which for things like models of care. So the models of care, the 11 pathways that set the strategy, that identify those type A patients and the type B patients, type A receiving the vehicles, the type B the virtually being managed in many different ways. But we didn't have the luxury of year 0 because of the state of the rest of the nation. And so we went straight into year 1, and the urgent care navigation hubs is a good example of that. The Surrey hubs are up and running. They are beginning to make a contribution. Our hubs all look quite different across the patch, and that is because we're obviously being flexible and responding to our systems, our providers, and what input they've been able to put in and how they've been able to put it in. So we have shown huge agility. If that's what you're looking for, Michael, we have shown huge agility in that, and each are contributing to not only to our own ability to respond, particularly to those requiring the most urgent responses, but also to what's coming in through the A&E doors and other areas. So we are on track with it all, and this is where the planning for next year has been really important. We have also been working with quite an agile PMO. So with the structure we've got in place, which I think is what you were asking about, do we have the right structures in place? Has taken the year to formulate that through, because we've had to work so quickly and dynamically. But we do have the right structure that's now agreed and gone through board and been signed off, and we are enacting that now. And we've had some excellent support from a lady called Ellie Wilkes and her colleagues in keeping going with the progress and the sight on our strategic aims and objectives and our priorities. So all our priorities are based on the strategy. We're very, very careful to keep everything connected to that strategy. If it's not connected, then we don't do it, and we just have to really recognise the risks and articulate those.
I really appreciate the question, because I think it's spot on, and it's the sort of question the governing body should be asking. Could I suggest that we, when we've gone through the reports from my colleagues as chairs of the various committees, we just return to that question, because, as Margaret says, it's a question that we should be constantly focused on. So thank you. You're happy with that, I hope. Thank you. Thank you. Nick, I apologise. I sometimes don't see people, but I believe you have a question. Please.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody, fellow colleagues, fellow governors. Sorry I can't be with you today, and I've got to step off in a minute. It was just one question for Margaret. You mentioned that there was an additional £10.2 million being allocated. I'm just wondering if firstly, is there any plan from us as a trust as to where we want to spend this? Is it all going into operationals, or is there some other investments? And also, are there any restrictions or recommendations that come with this that ring fence it as to where it can be kind of spent or invested?
Thank you, Nick, and good to see you. So no, it's not wrapped up in a package like the old maybe winter funds used to be, where you'd be told you could get an extra 2-3 million, and what are the schemes aligned to that. The break-even plan with the 25-minute C2 is based on the fact that that 10.2 million pound of nationally funded growth, along with the 10 million pound efficiency programme, and along with the other internal efficiencies we need to do to reduce by 4 minutes, it's all part of the same plan, Nick. So we don't have separate schemes attached to separate pots of money. This is a budget envelope to which we're working to break even and to get our 10 million SIPs and to get our 25 minutes.
Okay, Nick, does that answer your question? There'll obviously be
Yeah,
more.
thank you. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because there are areas and pockets that need investment. It's not just about throwing all frontline ops to put more vehicles out on the road. There's other things like the hubs or other investments that do help achieve that mean target that's been aimed for.
That's right.
Okay, thank you very much. Unless I don't see any other questions. No, thank you. Oh yeah, please. Thank you.
Sorry, just a quickie.
Yeah, of course.
Since the money was mentioned, do we yet know whether the increase in national insurance has been fully funded?
As far as I'm aware, yes, in our plans we have incorporated an allowance for that, but yes is the answer. Yep.
Thank you. Unless there are any more questions, can I now go on to the first of our assurance report, in very important patients delivering high patient care. And may I give the floor to Liz, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm going to focus on the first strategic priority. Obviously, we deliver high quality patient care. The summary report, I'm aware that you all have just some highlights around this. I think, you know, for councillor governors, there continues to be good assurance with the quality agenda, with progress made against each of the strategic priorities, and including delivery of the unscheduled care navigation hubs. I'm aware that we've already mentioned that, but the rollout of those very rapidly to cover Kent, Surrey and Sussex, with very differing models according to what our system partners requested, has been very successful. And as Margaret said, a review of those will be undertaken during the spring. Also, key areas of compliance, such as our electronic patient record and our patient safety incident framework. This level of assurance, again, has been validated externally by the system assurance meeting that's meant that we've been able to exit the recovery support programme. So significant amounts of evidence, shall we say, has been requested by the system to enable us to come out of that support programme. And as we heard, that was confirmed earlier this month. I think as NEDs, we do acknowledge the challenges in the sector. I'm aware we all met earlier to talk about red lines, what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable. I think the efforts to maintain operational performance has been really good for patients. The quicker our response, the better the outcome for our patients. And to be one of the few ambulance trusts that has achieved that C2 response time, I think everyone needs congratulating for that, particularly over that winter period, and with the support of our system partners, our acute trusts, and the way our hubs have operated to enable our patients that are suitable to follow alternative pathways rather than going to A&E, has been seen as a real success, both from the front door of our A&E departments and from our call handling and our response times. That has all significantly helped that. I think it's going to be a difficult time in terms of finances. Back to our red lines, we've got a joint meeting in April to review how this can be translated into our priorities to ensure that we can deliver the care that our patients need within our communities across Kent, Surrey, Sussex and North Hampshire. I think there's going to be some difficult decision making around that, depending on the outcome of the financial discussions today. And, you know, we have to ensure that our patients receive that high quality patient care at all times within the financial constraints that may well be given to us. I think good news, at our recent meeting, the Quality Committee reviewed the cardiac arrest annual report. It was a great result for us, central to our strategy, and reporting survival 30 days post-cardiac arrest was 11.5%. It's our highest ever reported survival figure and the highest survival figure reported by all ambulance trusts. It's also a 2% increase on the last year and 2% higher than the national average. And we want to thank everybody who has participated in that, both from our general public who performed CPR immediately to our first responders and to our ambulance crews out there. And we really want to build on this. There's been lots of communication out there. I hope people have seen it. There's a lovely glossy report, and I saw in one of the questions around having access to that report. There is a lovely glossy report if people would like a takeaway, and it's a fantastic achievement by the team. I think moving on from that, we're going to be looking at our health inequalities, where there are still areas of deprivation within our communities where, for instance, we don't have defib pads available. So our most vulnerable in our most deprived areas are going to have the worst outcome results. And I think that's a focus for us going forward in terms of how we can improve on that. And we'd really welcome help from our governors in terms of identifying those areas and how we can help support those communities. Another good news area is we received assurance from the Finance Committee following the completion of the remedial works at the Medicines Distribution Centre at Paddock Wood. It is all complete. All the works have been done. We have seen smiling team members down there. The processes have been put into place. There's been additional space to facilitate staff training and to expand the function, and it is now fit for the future. And a follow-up audit is planned in early 25-26 to provide external assurance. And I'm also aware Simon went down to visit that team to almost have an official opening. So this has been going on ever since I joined the trust for 2.5 years. It is now complete. And the committee also welcomed the work being undertaken by the 3 clinical directors to establish a new clinical model. Obviously, Jackie joined us as chief paramedic. She shared her priorities linked to the trust strategy and the aim of becoming more clinically led, and also ensuring that the chief paramedic ensures that the paramedic voice comes to the board. And I think that's so important that our shop floor workforce have direct access to a board colleague through that paramedic pathway. That's all I wanted to say. The bath is there, and I'm happy to take any questions on any of that.
Thanks, Liz. Very comprehensive. Please, Martin.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, firstly, one thing that does have to be commented upon is the cardiac arrest survival rate, which is a key metric for any ambulance service. I mean, that's something that should be recognised. I suppose there's a couple of things, but I'll just take the first one. The Medicines Distribution Centre, I appreciate there's going to be a follow-up audit early in the new year. I guess the question is, are the Meds assured that they're about the systems for monitoring how things are going in the Medicines Distribution Centre are sufficiently real time? Because it's all very well to have lagging measures and occasional audits. That tells you what's gone wrong. when it's gone wrong, or what's gone right when it's gone right. But how is that the performance of that and the system, the process efficiency oversought on an ongoing basis, and as an assurance, are you assured that those systems are in place to work in real time?
So I respond to that. So obviously our new chief pharmacist, I say new, she's been in a year now, nearly a year, Shani, is maintaining close monitoring of that. We do monitor how that MDC works and how they manage to get our medicines around the trust. And that is being measured on a standard key set of metrics, and happy to share those with you. But we do have that level of assurance in terms of process, flow and output that is now working.
Any more questions? Is that it? You want?
Well, just a quick one. In terms of public defibrillators, is there a document setting out the criteria that ought to be met for one to be placed in a particular location? I'm just conscious I've got loads of supermarkets around me, which really was a public duty, ought to have a public one in place, but I don't know whether that meets any sort of criteria or how one goes about it if I wanted to try to persuade them.
So there is a whole network run by the British Heart Foundation. The register is kept by the British Heart Foundation, which Ambulance Trust logs into, that says where. So if we get a call coming in, our call handlers can actually say where the nearest defib is to access. But our medical director and Dan Cody in particular are looking at that within our local communities where we're missing those local pads, those defibs. So we can let you have that information as governors. And partly it's covered in that cardiac arrest report.
Thank you, Liz. Harvey, please.
Thank you. It's a question really relating to the hubs, and there's several bits. One is we've got information which indicates that an evaluation is going to take place, which is great, but it's got various dates. In some of the documents it talks by 31st of March, then it's in April. I think Michael just mentioned early summer, and I think you've said in the spring. So that's a little bit vague to me. When are we actually going to get the report? And what I think we would be interested in is what's the scope going to be in terms of, yes, it might look at the effectiveness, but also the benefits that it brings in some of the other things that we're trying to achieve. So Hear and Treat, which at the moment is at 14%, not the 16% that we are hoping for. So perhaps it's not having the impact there that we were looking for. Has it produced an impact on our response times? Perhaps that is. How much is it actually costing? And are we satisfied that all the effort that went into this, and I think we'd all acknowledge that's huge, but is it paying real dividends for us? And I suppose the final bit is, and is it either enabling us to build links because our partners are seeing the knock-on effects of less people being delivered to ambulance bays and things like that, and that they are actively supporting it because at the moment there's no mandate for them to do so. Sorry, that's a very complicated question.
I'll do a bit of double act with Howard from a finance perspective as well, if that's okay. The dates don't cover all of the hubs. We opened our hubs at very different timings. So Ashford was our first hub to go live. That will be the first hub to be reviewed. So that's happening as we speak now. Our last hubs only opened during December. So we need 3 months of operating to be able to review those hubs. The clinical models are different in every hub according to what our partners wanted. So in some hubs we have frailty consultants, in some hubs we have A&E consultants, in some hubs we have GPs, community practitioners, some hubs are the people sit in one room, some hubs, Surrey is virtual, so very differing models, and models that, and hubs that we put in place at risk for CCAM at the time. They weren't particularly funded from our partners. So it was put in to manage those winter pressures, our ways of working. We don't have a standardised format for those hubs as yet. The clinical teams are working on our clinical models of care for patients, but hence why the dates are different. And I'll pass over to Howard to talk about how we're reviewing and the financial aspects of those hubs.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. Yes, good question. But just to be clear, so everyone's clear, there is a very comprehensive exercise that's going on, and I've seen the spec for it for reviewing these hubs. So to get your benchmark of Surrey against the others, we will get it. I think it's a very good question to ask when. And in fact, the detail that I saw, I actually challenged to say there's almost too much detail, and maybe the delay is happening because they're trying to do too much. Anyway, the key is that it's happening. We will get it, hopefully sooner rather than later, but I will just check on the date. I'm afraid I can't say specifically when it is. All I do know is it's happening, and as Liz says correctly, that we need to have some months of experience to be able to have a useful report out of it. But at the end of the day, we will get a report that compares one with it, against the other in terms of some key metrics for each hub. I think where this then leads us is, as Margaret has said, there has been a lot of agility to put these in places, dealing with the separate circumstances in each hub. Clearly, what I think we should be then doing is, with the benefit of the results of those hubs, is saying what is the best practice here, and then influencing those hubs and our partners to say this is a better way of doing it. You know, how about we do this instead of that, so that we tend, it might take some time, but we tend towards a sort of best practice hub and try and steer our stakeholders and other partners in that direction. Since we, you know, those results and benchmarking hub against hub should give us a clear indication of which is working best. And financially, as I'll come on to later, we should get some data on that as well. But obviously, so far, so good. As you've seen, we're meeting our targets. But yeah, so far, so good.
Yeah. Thank you. I think my two questions remain. When will we see the hub by hub reports completed?
Yep.
But it's the follow-on from that which I think is going to be of real strategic value. And so when roughly will we see the sort of the amalgamation of those to identify what looks like the ideal best practice hub, so that we can then start the meaningful conversations with partners? Is that going to be by July or by August? What point of the year does it come up?
That's roughly the sort of timetable that I would be expecting, yes. So summer. So we'll get some reports coming out later in spring, and then be in a better position in summer, so July, August time, to get some sort of steer as to what best practice is looking like.
Right.
That's where
Okay.
I'm thinking.
And
yeah.
to what's the plan in terms of sharing that with the council?
I'm not sure. I'm sure we can work on that to schedule in your next meeting.
Harvey, may I come back and make some observations? So forgive me if I gave different dates. most of my life has been working in Whitehall, where you're always very careful about dates, you know, and it's really interesting with the national plan at the moment. They're talking about spring. Well, civil service spring is usually May, June, possibly July. So we've all got different definitions. I think you raised some good points. I mean, as a non-executive, and working with Howard and Liz, we recognise that this needs to be done properly. The evaluations need to be done properly. And I would return to the point that they are still very early days. But I think it's all credit to the executive that they have put in place an evaluative framework, and that often doesn't happen. So that's the number one point. I would say that we need to get the information together. I think the NEDs need to do their role in evaluating it. You know, once the executive have done their role, that's going to take some time. So I'm not trying to be awkward, but I think we just need to give the executive a bit of latitude in this. I do take your point, though, about there is a strategic imperative here. So what we're trying to do, you know, support the executive in the outreach to the various ICBs. And I know Subbu has done this, and then Karen and I were at the Sussex Committee in Common ICB, and that's really interesting because all of the ICBs seem to be reviewing their A&E emergency care pathways and how they deal with that because of the issue that we face nationally about too many people going into an acute setting. I think the big challenge for us is to make sure that as that redesign is done, the hubs and the lessons that we've learned are really taken on board. And the other point I'd say is in most developments in the commercial sector, you start off with a whole range of different innovations and you eventually move to some standardisation. And the only way in which we're going to get improvements in productivity at a reasonable cost, at the same time benefiting patients, is some standardisation. I don't know what the balance is. It might be 80% standardisation, 20% bespoke, but we don't yet have that information. But for me, the imperative is let's get the information. We're much stronger then to go back to our ICBs and say, this is some real lessons for you about how we design something that is sustainable. But it needs to be, listening to the Secretary of State, there needs to be a lot more standardisation than has existed in the NHS in the past. So I'm sorry, it's a long answer to your question, but I'm really just saying, I'd like to promise you that as soon as we have that information and it's gone through appropriate diligence through review by the NEDs, we will get that to Council. We want to be as open and transparent with you as possible. Margaret, is that fine for you?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Just to give you, I absolutely agree with everything you've said, Michael, but the 1st of April is when we have the day where everybody comes together with all the evaluation data. So I think the timescale you've set out between you is right.
I think
let's civil service speak here. I think it may be too early at the June meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's probably the autumn meeting, really, to be honest with you. Martin, you've got a comment, and then did you?
Yes, I mean, if I can just move away from the review for a moment. The two things that concern me about the hub is, firstly, that as I understand it, the clinicians that are involved from outside the trust, there's no commissioning of that. It almost feels like it's voluntary. And it doesn't feel like it's on a very secure footing, especially in the context of the Secretary of State talking about, you know, streamlining and all this. Well, the very first thing that's likely to happen if acute trusts start getting streamlined is that our clinicians will be withdrawn. So that's the first concern. I will come on to the insurance question. The second one, and almost the bigger one, is I was really alarmed to see that we're only getting a 21% acceptance rate of the alternative care pathways. Way back, Emma, who for those who weren't involved before, used to be the ops director here, and I, going back many years when we were in London Ambulance, fought with alternative care pathways for a very, very long time. It's been the holy grail of ambulance services since 1066. And so consequently, I suppose my assurance question is this: are the NEDs assured about the work in train to tackle those two fundamental problems? Because if those two fundamental problems are not addressed, the wheels will come off this aspect of the strategy wagon.
Shall I respond to that?
Please, thank you.
So, and going back to Harvey's, we do have current metrics of how those hubs are working and those patients that are going to alternate pathways or remaining at home with follow-up. It is a hybrid model, and we are reliant on system partners in terms of part of that workforce in some hubs. In other hubs, it's entirely CCAM. We also have an issue around community pathways and referrals, that they don't work 24/7 like we do. So a number of our hubs are only working 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. Overnight, those patients will revert back to a traditional ambulance service with some navigation through our call centres, but we cannot refer to alternative pathways overnight. So it is still very much work in progress. And as we say, each of the hubs are working differently. So we don't currently have that level of assurance. Either around alternative pathways, we're trying to do the best we can and refer, but is it safe to leave a patient from 6 o'clock in the evening till 8 a.m. until they're reviewed by adult social care, for instance, that someone might not come in that day? So those patients are likely to be picked up and taken to A&E, to a place of safety. So as I say, that's still work in progress. Financially, we don't know what's going to happen. We are doing our best guess and are planning around that. We're hoping with our levels of communication and the metrics that we currently have, that hubs are there for the future and that care navigation is the answer to prevent so many of these patients being conveyed to hospital, which isn't the right destination for them. And as we said earlier, we spoke about those red lines around financial planning. You know, we have to see what happens and how best we can plan according to our resources going forward.
Thank you for that. Just a couple of follow-ups, if I may. The first is, I understand the proportion of the problem around the acceptance of the urgent care centres, wherever it would be, is that actually when the ambulances turn up, the patients are sent away, and they could be sent away for one of two reasons. Either the care pathway is at full capacity anyway, which is an issue for the system providers, or whoever, nurse on the front door doesn't realise that the ambulance service can actually refer there. So that's one aspect about the conversations with the commissioners about what they're doing to actually educate people in the care pathways that we can take people and what the appropriateness of patients that can be taken there are. The second thing is to do with, it's all very well to refer people to alternative pathways as long as they're not taken to ED 24 hours later. Now, when I was working on this way back, the assistant medical director in London wouldn't give clinical assurance to a project around alternative care pathways for the very simple reason there was no data about how many people who were taken in on Monday to an alternative care pathway were taken into ED on Tuesday. So I guess the question is, as well as part of, I suppose this is going back to review, the review really needs to cover off whether or not this is a one take or a two take.
And we are following up on that, so I can give you that level of assurance. Also, if we're discharging on scene our patients, then our practice development leads in our Make Ready centres are also auditing those discharge on scene and saying, was that an appropriate discharge? Does there need to be follow-up? And they're doing that within the system, so we can see that, and they can either resend a crew to that patient or advise that patient to take a different pathway as well. So there is follow-up audit and review around discharge on scene, and also monitoring of whether those patients do 24 hours later dial 999. So that is actually happening. So I am assured around that.
Okay, can I say thank you for that? Can I just say the terms of reference is really for the executive to so I know you're making that this is an executive decision on that, but thank you. We will. I'm sure you will take this forward on that basis. Karen and then Kirsty. Thank you.
Yes, just to augment some of Liz's comments about the importance of the pathways in relation to your question. So Michael alluded to a meeting we were both at recently, the Committee in Common, and one of the things that all of the trusts in the area have signed up to is one of the priorities, one of three, is around urgent and emergency care. And also, as an important part of that work, is to refocus the work of the Provider Collaborative, which is some work that had started a while ago, to really get the words that we used was the best clinicians from each of our organisations in the room on these pathways who have got authority for decision making. And I think that's absolutely crucial to the development that we're talking about. So that work is now in train, and I think that's something that's going to be very important in terms of helping all organisations to drive this forward. And your points are very well made. I think the other piece of the jigsaw, from my perspective, that is still not quite on the board is where social services fit into all of this. And I think we're still waiting to deliver and find out more about that, but they are crucial.
Thank you. I think that was a really important debate, and really we will certainly come back when the evaluation's done and continue this discussion to give you the assurance that you're looking for. So thank you for that. But Kirsty.
So mine is not necessarily about the evaluation, but so February, I feel like I've got an echo. So in February, I accompanied both Karen and Subo to the Brighton Hub, and one of the things that came out, and it's just to seek some assurance from both our exec and our non-exec colleagues, one of the frustrations with the APPs, the advanced paramedic practitioners, and the other clinicians working in the hub is that it's okay to have all these alternate pathways and all the different community settings, but quite a lot of them don't accept referrals from our paramedic workforce because they don't acknowledge that they have got that expertise to refer into. And I think whether it's part of the review or it's a separate piece of work, I'd just like some assurance that we do some concentrated work on that, because we can have all the hubs in the world, but if they don't take the referrals into the community setting and other pathways, then we're not really going to achieve what we need to do in the hubs. So that's just me as a plea to just get the paramedic workforce accepted as a trusted clinician.
Margaret.
Thank you, Kirsty. So that's a problem that's well known nationally, and I was talking to one of the advisors to both government and NHS England on the role of paramedics, and the question he asked me is, what do we need to do to make the paramedics have the confidence to push their status? So it's a two-way horse, I think is what I'm trying to say. And there is something about that for me, having observed and been part of it for a few years now. But it is being managed locally, so you're asking for the exec's input into that. We're working extremely closely with commissioners, and in fact, I can state that with our work through ACE, so in ACE, so that's the Ambulance Association of Chief Executives, there are 8 groups, executive groups. 3 of those are chaired by us here at CCAM, and David is the chair of the Strategy and Commissioning Group. And so we are influencing national commissioning to get a better commissioning model for ambulance services per se. And that does include elements into the operational model, which includes ensuring trusted assessor status can be seen. It is an ongoing issue. It's an ongoing issue across all healthcare disciplines. It's not just paramedics, and it's a very personal-based problem. So it's really based on human factors. But I just want to assure you that there is both local from here at CCAM, also regional and also national eyes on this.
Kirsty, is that? Yep, thank you. Liz, is there anything? No, thank you. Are there any other questions to Liz at this point? Please, Andrew.
as you know, Fallers is something that I'm particularly interested in. I see that C3 response times are still looking at around 7 hours. I've been recently, as a community responder, as an emergency responder, responding for the service. And in the mornings, and this is in this area, so this may not be across the trust, but I think it might just be helpful to illustrate my question. I've been very conscious that there are quite a lot of there's quite a lot of downtime in the mornings when ambulances are being sent to cover points, and we've got good coverage. At the same time, we've got an ever-increasing frailty stack of elderly Fallers who are waiting in the system for clinical evaluation through the EOC clinicians making a decision whether that patient can or cannot be assisted or whether there's an alternative pathway. All of that leads to then a point that I've had from a number of EOC staff to say, if only we could have sent that ambulance that was on the cover point to pick Mrs. Smith up, she may not have been laying there for some hours and therefore wouldn't have needed to be conveyed to a hospital, or she might have been assessed as being more urgently needed to go to hospital because she's in the care hub system. That is a regular conversation that I've experienced on many Fridays, which is my usual day for a shift. So my question to Liz is, are you assured that the clinical navigation system is working effectively enough? And is there something that could do with a bit of a review to just see whether actually we could get some of those people out of the stack earlier and thus reduce the 6 hours and 40 minutes that the C3 numbers appear to me to be in the integrated quality report and appear to be not really getting much better.
I'll try and respond. So I think in the hubs, our hubs are pulling people off of the stack. So patients aren't referred to the hub as such. The hub are monitoring the stack and seeing which patients they can hopefully deal with and remove from the stack. Separate to that, the EOC are doing a big push on first responders. So they are also trying to look at the stack and saying, who can we send a first response team rather than an ambulance crew to? It's still work in progress, Andrew, and there's still much more to be done on it. And I'd advise people to go and visit the hubs to see how they do manage that pulling from the stack, because it's fascinating. It might be a frailty consultant saying, I can see that person on the stack, I think we can deal with that. It might be one of our advanced paramedics who says, actually, they need a 999 response, we can't deal with that. Or this person, it might be a mental health patient, needs to follow through a mental health partner pathway. But I think that is all part of our evaluation of the hub working, how we can manage that. And at the moment, EOC and the hubs are not integrated and not cross-referring as we work at the moment.
But a patient who's categorised as a C3, not entirely, but a lot of those are Fallers, goes into the stack, as I understand it, sits in the stack until it's been reviewed by, as you say, the urgent care hubs or by a clinician based in EOC, as opposed to saying non-injury fall, just need to be got off the floor, let's send someone. So it sits in the stack, and then in the afternoon, everyone's running around like, this is my one example. So I know this might not be across the whole trust. I do accept that. But I wonder if you could be assured by some further investigation as to whether what I'm saying about my experience in one area is actually replicated in a number of other areas, and we've got a resource that we could use to get that 7 hours-ish down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was really good, interesting, particularly important area that we'll continue to look at. We are on scheduled. I was going to suggest that we have a 10-minute break if people would like that. If we could be back here by 20 to 12, that would be great. And we'll continue with Subu's report on people. Thank you very much. Thank you. Are we on time? Okay, I think we're all back. Thank you for coming back quickly. Subu, could I ask you kindly, as our chair of the People Committee, to introduce your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Everyone has stolen my thunder. So, you'll be delighted to hear I've got very little to say. So I was sitting here thinking, what can I talk about that you haven't already talked about? So I've got two things just to add. One is, as we've been talking about the unscheduled care navigation hubs, we did talk a little bit, quite a lot actually, at the last People Committee about this. Particularly focusing on the workforce. So what are the sort of workforce implications? Because the skill sets operating in all the different hubs is quite different. So what does that mean for us in terms of getting to a standardised model? So again, we've already talked about what will come through the review, but that was just an interesting conversation that we had at the committee. Because there are implications for us as an organisation around what that means for various roles and what they will do going forward, and ditto the regulator and professional standards. So that was one conversation we had on that. And then the other piece I think that isn't covered and we haven't talked about is around the HR improvement plan. So that is progressing. I think the committee had partial assurance on this at the last time that we talked about it, essentially because there was some slippage in the timescales on delivery, but the rationale for that is because there is an organisational-wide restructure, and therefore aligning the HR improvement plan with that restructure seems like a very sensible thing to do, especially if you're trying to think about what is the model that will deliver HR support and advice locally, then you need to do that in alliance with whatever structure is developing locally as well to make sure that it works well. So we will keep an eye on that to make sure that stays on time. Other than that, Chair, I don't have anything further to say.
Okay, thank you. So may I open it to questions, please? Martin, please.
Right. Thank you. First of all, for those who are new, let me just explain why I'm asking this question and where I'm coming from. One of my other roles is that I'm a lay representative to NHS England, a workforce director at Kent, Surrey and Sussex. And over the course of, not this winter, the one before, I was involved in an intervention which involved going round and interviewing all the student paramedics, so the undergraduates in 4 universities that are pipelines to this trust, about their experiences. And the report that came out of that was delivered to the trust in August of last year. And when it was published, it was put into the public domain, actually on the same day as the last Council of Governors. Now, at the bottom of the People report, it makes reference to this in the context of sexual safety. But what I wanted to say was that I hope you've all had an opportunity to see it, because I've sent it to those whose email addresses I've had, and asked for the Secretariat to send it to those of you whose addresses I haven't got. And from that you'll see that although the sexual dimension is in there, is very much the most important in one respect, but a minority in another, in the sense that the much bigger issues in terms of the numbers of people affected are around processes, systems, communication and undermining. And when I say undermining, I mean students hearing themselves referred to as that little girl and that dumb blonde and other such terms. So some of it is really not very nice at all. So there are issues around central management of how placements are done, or not, as the case may be, accessibility, responsiveness to emails, that kind of thing. There's whole issues about how the rostering system works and how the students seem to be not regarded at all in the way that that's operated. There are issues around practice educators and the degree to which they're actually interested in the role or not, and the extent to which the students actually have access to them. And the behaviours that I refer to. There are things like students being sent to go on placements, driving halfway across Kent, Surrey and Sussex to find there's no crew to take them out. There's a load of issues in here. Now, I know that the Trust met with NHS England at the end of February, and the People Committee will be looking at, presumably, what I hope would be an action plan coming out of that. But I want to ask a question about the past, not the future. The Trust has seen the content of the report, even if the wording wasn't finalised, for 7 months. So my assurance question to the NEDs is, looking back over the past 7 months, have you seen the report? And have you sought any assurance to date about the work in train? So this is not about the content, this is about the process. For example, have there been a project board set up? Has there been a working group? So my question is, have you all seen the report? And secondly, has assurance been sought about how the Trust is tackling it, rather than how it is going to actually take action?
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. It's a really good question, and thank you for highlighting those issues within that report. So yes, I have seen it, and in fact I've had a discussion with Jacqueline Lindridge, who is our Chief Paramedic Officer, on this specific issue. I think it's fair to say that perhaps there was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other in terms of the timeframes, when it came to our attention and how quickly we should have acted upon it. So I think the committee, when we look at this next time, I think we need to get some assurance around why there was a delay and how we could do that better going forward. As far as the improvement plan is concerned, there is one, and there are about 16 objectives on that improvement plan addressing some of those specific issues that you have drawn our attention to. So at its next committee, we will look at that improvement plan in more detail and at the timeframes and what will be delivered. So it absolutely is on our radar. I can't give you that assurance at the moment because I haven't seen it, so it has to go through the governance process. So maybe at the next governors meeting, we'll be able to give you more assurance on that.
May I just say one? You quite rightly declared an interest in this area, Martin, so thank you for doing that. You asked the question of have all of the NEDs seen it? The answer is no. Being perfectly. My understanding, because I asked the question when I knew that you were going to raise this, is that the report, I think, and I'll ask for the executive to confirm, didn't arrive. We received it, I think, in December. The important thing for me is that I want the executive to have time to reflect what is the report saying and to produce an action plan. And Suba was quite right to say that this is within the terms of reference of the People Committee. So I would expect the People Committee to be reporting back to the board once they have seen the action plan and to give assurance that they are confident that that action plan is appropriately resourced and has got the relevant milestones. You asked the question retrospectively, what does this tell us about the organisation over the last 7 months or before? I think that's part of the wider cultural issue that Simon and the executive team are trying to address. I think it is important that we have a clear strategy that is focused on the totality of how we bring about cultural change, and that we make sure that all our paramedics are treated appropriately as individuals and are given all opportunities to flourish. But that's where I'm coming from. I take your interest. It is an important issue for us, and we will focus on it. But I want to go through the assurance mechanism, drawing on the skills of the People Committee to advise the board that the action that the Trust are taking are appropriate. Before I let you come back, I would like to give Margaret an opportunity as an executive.
Thank you, Michael. So I was part of the exec body that met with the EQI. Kirsty was there too a number of weeks ago now. They had received the first draft of the improvement plan that Suba has seen as well. And we had a couple of hours with them where they came with very strong key lines of inquiry. But we've had no immediate actions from them and expecting for their plan to come through so that it can come through People Committee. So that provides us some reassurance that what they saw in the improvement plan is beginning to address. But absolutely, stand by the point that unfortunately the experience students have had in this organisation and continue to have to a degree are reflection of the culture of the ambulance sector, and we're absolutely not blind to that. In fact, I would say the majority of our days every day is in addressing that and dealing with that in a very multi-pronged way.
Right. Okay, well, what I'm trying to do here is distinguish between two things. There's the action that the Trust will take to address the substantive issues, and there's the issue about, now, I'm looking at the report, and it says date of final report, 21st of August. I've also been told in person by NHS England that the report, the first draft of the report, or the, whatever form it was in, came to the Trust in August. Now, if I'm sitting here as a manager, and somebody tells me all this stuff is going on, I don't sit around for months worrying about the formulation of the wording of the final report. I may well do that, but I would also say, well, look, I don't have to hang around to start considering how I'm going to address the substance of the issues raised for the people who are working in my trust. So my concern is is not what the Trust will do in the future, but the speed with which it's reacted in the past. Now, if you heard from the 277, basically people who are in their teenagers or in their early to mid-20s, you know, it does influence you what you hear, I'm afraid, especially when you hear what we heard. And I'm just somewhat concerned that 7 months later, an action plan is being put forward because, and the thing that really heightened it for me was that at the day of the last COG in December, coincidentally in the afternoon, we had one of the development sessions, and some people came along to talk to us who are actually involved in the this clinical area of overseeing the students and all the rest of it. They were new to the Trust. They'd only been in sort of from the summer themselves, so there was no comment on them. But they didn't know anything about this report at all. So what this said to me was, right, so the Trust's had sight of the report at some level since August. So the people who we would think would be deeply involved in acting on it in December didn't even know the report existed. And the question that comes to my mind is, why not?
I can't answer your question, Martin. I want to be honest with you. I'm not going to, obfuscate the issue. All I can give you the assurance is that, speaking to Subu and the executive, they are taking the report seriously and they are putting in place an action plan to deal with it. Whether that should have been done earlier, I don't know. I don't have the detail in front of me, to be truthful. I would say one other thing, and I only just draw on my wider corporate experience that we've all got around this table. It is important that you really focus on the root cause, and I think the root cause is culture within the ambulance service more widely, and what you describe is a horrible symptom of that culture. And I really, really think that Simon is focusing on the right thing by changing the culture of the organisation. You don't do it overnight, and I think you can't do it. And I know you're not saying this with a command and control attitude. You've got to actually get the people to understand that this really, really matters, and it's not acceptable. Whether that is acting, whether that's been implemented at the right speed, I don't know, but all I would say is that when Simon arrived and the new executive team were put in place, there were a multiple of issues that the organisation has had to face, and I think what we've heard earlier this morning is we are beginning to make significant inroads into some of those issues, and I can just say that I'm confident that the executive will focus on this, but we will hold them to account. And your intervention today is an important wake-up call. I think we will continue to do so. But I do thank you, and I thank you for the obvious dedication that you've put to this. It obviously matters to you, and it should matter to us. And I want to give you that assurance. But
can I just make one point? It's not just the culture. It's the systems and the processes that go around the management of student placements as well.
Okay, I accept that, and forgive me, I should have said that as well. That's an important correction.
Thank you, Chair. It's just Oh, sorry, Angela. I was just going to say probably what you're going to say, but just to add to what Michael has said, Martin, and Margaret will tell you this because she's had enough questions and haranguing from me and other members of People Committee on this. We are nearly constantly asking questions about students, student placements, their quality, how they are managed, how our students feel. She's constantly getting questions and asking for assurances around how they are being treated, what measures have we got in place. And as you know from the number of times it's come up at this meeting, it is constantly on our radar. In addition to this, the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians have also visited each of our higher education institutions to talk a bit about, if you're not confident to speak up there, then, you've got the Freedom to Speak Up route as well. So Michael is right when he says there is a cultural issue, but we are constantly looking at this, and that assurance question will keep being asked until we are satisfied that we have full assurance.
Sorry, Angela, I should have seen you.
That's all right. So I guess speaking with my appointed Education Governor hat on, obviously, as you know, I've raised it before, and Karen's come and visited us, and so working in terms of with the non-execs, but also with my dean of school hat on, have been working specifically for the University of Brighton students, but also linking in with colleagues at other HEIs, and have come up for meetings with Margaret and the team. So there is some traction, and obviously I've been raising specific cases, and we've given examples from our university. I suppose, and I agree with you about the culture piece, and I can see some change. Part of the culture piece, and we did discuss it when we had a recent meeting, is CCAM being more open to working collaboratively, and that's quite a new shift, and I think it's reflective of the silence that's happened. So I've got a meeting in my diary in the day job on Tuesday. Well, it's with NHS England, so it may or may not happen now. But it is the Kent, Surrey, Sussex Paramedics Student Partnership meeting, and on the agenda is overview of CCAM education quality improvement plans. But my plea is, how have you got one of those without engaging with us yet? So no, it hasn't. It's been so the one of the culture things to work on for CCAM, and we have raised this in our meeting, so it's not new, is the tendency to sort of what it feels like from outside, scuttle off into a corner and have a look at what's happening and make a plan, but actually not come out and talk to the relevant stakeholders who could inform you and help support you in that plan. Because around the students, we have so many structures. We've got practice we've offered to share, supporting students from different ethnic backgrounds. We've got loads of resources. We've got loads of stuff that we can put into this from the HEI perspective to support. And also we have loads of other mechanisms of feedback too. So we've got loads of intelligence as well on what's going on with students and where their challenges are. So I guess, again, it is just surfacing, and it's starting to happen now. But again, that plea to work together, because we can move it on a lot quicker and help each other loads if we do. And so, yeah, that's what I just wanted to flag. Thank you.
Angela, thank you. And that was beautifully articulated. We did surface through our long meeting that a section of the organisation that is still to really open up its arms and embrace partners rather than just pull resources from partners and do our own thing with it. And for me, that's a reflection of where CCAM was a number of years ago, very internally focused, without the skills and capability and confidence to just open its doors and embrace partners and be very open and transparent with everything. And we still have some small pockets. And I'm grateful for the work you're doing with us together, because together we can tackle that small corner as well. But I'm pretty sure, because of the drive in the rest of the organisation, that we will turn that around. And for me, my 2.5 years experience here, students are now being talked about very frequently. Subo will have seen the progress of that, I would think, over the years. When I first came, we just didn't even acknowledge that they were a very important part of our organisation tapestry. And we have structures in place that don't put people that want to be mentors in as mentors. We just put everybody in as a mentor. So there's a number of structures, you're right, Martin, a number of structures that we are looking at. And so I think, fair challenge and comment, we will continue to work together to change that. And again, it's a reflection of how much progress has happened in other areas and how much work is still to happen in some small specialised areas.
Harvey, and then I'd like to sum up on this issue, if I may.
It's two questions. One about the overall HR implementation or change. Michael, you referred to the fact that we've come out of RSP, but there are a couple of focuses for CQC going forward and oversight. And it's quite concerning to hear that it's drifted back. Yes, the organisation has changed a bit, and that needs to be taken into account. But we've still got a risk factor of 20 around this. And how assured are the NEDs that we will get back on track despite the reappraisal of bits because the organisation's changed? So that's question one. Question two, as Subo will recognise, is I'm going to go on about appraisals. And my background is performance management. I used to lecture on it. And I ran it for an organisation which had, at various stages, 120,000 people worldwide. And to see it still at less than 61% getting an appraisal, after all the effort, and I know that Subo has done a lot to push for change on this, I find very disappointing. Because that's probably lower than we've had at various times during the year. It's just not improving. This should be the one conversation that goes on between a manager and their team members about that team member. It shouldn't just be about things you've got wrong or where you are in the pecking order, but it should be about everything. How we can help you do better. What are your aspirations? It's about retention. It's about development. And it's not happening. And it seems to be stuck. So my question is, do the NEDs have any assurance that it's going to get unstuck? Because that's pretty fundamental to a culture change.
Sorry, thank you for the question. Obviously, Subo, you've been quite rightly holding the executive to account on this. Where are we? Would you like to give your...
Thank you, Harvey, for that question. You know it's my favourite topic of conversation. I'm thinking of having appraisal tattooed on my arm, to show how fond of it I am. Your question, do we have assurance that this is ever going to turn around? Honestly, at the moment, no. And I think that the HR improvement plan has to be some way down the line, I think, to give us some level of assurance that some of these key things are going to change. Now, that is not to suggest that this is all in HR's gift. It's not. They're an important partner in having and enabling those conversations to happen, as I've said before. But it does come back to the culture of this organisation, I'm afraid. And we have, as you know, when you've come to Observe People Committee, we've pushed very hard on management and leadership training. And we've said that should be maintained even through emergency and crisis times. That was a big change, and the board was committed to doing that, and has stood by that commitment. So that training does continue, even when it's all hands on deck around emergencies and winter planning and so on. So I think we have to continue to keep the pressure up around management and leadership training. My sense when I go out and I talk to staff is that they always value it, and a lot of that happens informally, but there is no formal documentation around those one-to-one conversations that are happening. So it is by no means universal that, conversations are not happening. I think it is just an interpretation of that formality of, is it formally being documented as an appraisal? So I think we can do better on that. But I don't think it is going to happen until and unless the management and leadership training is much further on. And I think our HR function is working slightly differently.
Harvey, you're quite right, and I support all that Subu has said. I think we need to be honest about the degree of change in this area that we're having to take through, and changing your HR function, and I do think it needed to change, is not easy. I think the non-executives, and I speak for myself here, have confidence in the head of people, Sarah, who's leading this. I think she has a plan. We are supporting her and giving her the space to do that. But I would build on something that Subu said, which is very insightful. When I go out, I haven't been out recently, and you talk to staff, they will say to you, we have had discussions about my development, my manager is quite good. Not all of them, and it's not universal. Now, whether that is absolutely captured as a formal appraisal, I don't think it is. And the other feedback you get, and I'm sure you've heard it, is I don't want this because all they do is ask me questions about, have I done all my statutory training, have I done this? So it doesn't become what I would call as a modern approach to personal development. So I think there's something around capturing what we do at the moment, but making our appraisals fit for purpose and making them something that add value both to the executive and the person being appraised. I don't think we're in that space, so I would support what Subu said about not being assured. Are we on the case? Yes, we are. I'm also very mindful, I think Liz reminded me once that we need to comply with these statistics for CQC, don't we, really? So it is an imperative that we address this. Your challenge is taken, and we will continue to push on this particular area. But I give you some confidence. I think our HR is much stronger than it's been for many years since I've been here. But Karen, I think you wanted to.
Yes, thank you. I was going to come back on the issues raised by Martin and Angela, but I'd also like to make a comment on the appraisals, if I may. So I think I'm only new to the Organisation and People Committee, but I can assure everyone else that Subu and the rest of the committee very much have this in their sights. I won't reiterate points that have already made, but from a professional point of view, I am also interested in the metrics on whether people that have had appraisals find them valuable or not. So I think we need to keep that very much in the frame. However, I do take some reassurance from all the work, which is an adjunct piece of work that's been going on around clinical supervision for the paramedics. As a nurse, that's custom and practice with what I've been brought up with, but I'm aware it's comparatively new, as the paramedic profession is comparatively new with some of the other professions that have been doing this for some time. And I think from the response that I've seen so far, from where we're beginning to roll that out, and the commitment certainly from Jackie to drive that, I take great comfort from that, because I think that is where the feedback about their professional practice, which isn't necessarily with their line manager, it's with someone that has got more experience than them, is absolutely crucial from students upwards in terms of how we're offering support and feedback to people about what they're doing with their patients. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of that piece of work, which is also in early days yet, but I'm very heartened to see that it's starting so well.
Yes,
I was
please.
just going to come back on the other point around Martin and Angela's discussion. So you asked about the NEDs specifically. Again, I think I just wanted to thank Angela and for hosting a visit by me, because I had picked up from that there were issues around this. So it was helpful for me to triangulate some of the issues. And I have come back and I've already had a discussion with Jackie around some of the things that we discussed. And I was very encouraged by the response I got about the work that's already ongoing, which hopefully we can tap into the expertise and resources of our surrounding universities to help with this work. And I think your points are well made, and I know Margaret's also keen to follow up on that. So I can give you some reassurance on that, but I will keep you posted. Thank you.
I would like to summarise, and because, Martin, the point that you made has got a lot of resonance for me. So I probably bored people to death with talking about my previous career, but I really do get the point around. So I ran an organisation where we had about 150 graduates, school leavers coming in every year. And we, as a management team, put so much effort on their experience being a good one, because even if they don't stay in the organisation, the metric I wanted is that the moment they leave for valid reasons, they can always testify that their experience was a good one and they were ambassadors for the organisation for the rest of their career. I'm also mindful that in your own personal development, the experience that you have as a school leaver or as an undergraduate in those early formative years can influence the way you develop and feel for the rest of your professional life. So we have a duty of care in this space. Angela, I heard what you said, and I hope genuinely that we are moving into a much more collaborative space. But I do think this is an important issue for the Trust as part of its wider cultural change. I'm new to this, the governance and what we can actually provide to you as camp, but I did wonder, Peter, if we could look in the future for possibly a session in private, I don't know, where Jackie might come and explain how we're responding to this, so that we can give you the assurance that we are in a better place with those people who join the organisation. I hope that would, Martin, respond to your question. And you can ask a bit more detail and I would look for the chair of the People Committee to be there, and probably Liz as well, because we need to maintain the principle of, you're holding the NEDs to account. But that's just a suggestion.
I was going to say, I mean, we've got, I've forgotten what it's technically called, but the COG board get-together in April, haven't we? I mean, is that an appropriate situation for Jackie to come along? Because I'm just mindful that you'll have the conversation in March. We'll next get together in June, is it, or something? We'll be 3 months, 4 months off from where we are now.
Time's not here at the moment, and there are really strategic imperative issues that we need to bring to council and work with. So can I take that away? Can't absolutely promise on that level, but it's a helpful suggestion. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. One question, two? Yep. Lee, and then...
Just a quick follow-up, please, Chair and Subu, just on the issue of ECSW pay harmonisation. That, I believe, has now been completed. And I think we also have the TAPS, the trainee ambulance practitioners. Yeah, TAPS. That I think there's still work being done on that. Is that still in progress, or has that now been completed? And are you, Subu, assured that everyone's been paid what they should have been paid? To make it an assurance question.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes and yes is the short answer to that. So we did hear that over 2 people committees. We had this conversation. And, I think we should congratulate Sarah in particular on resolving these issues, because I think they've been quite long-standing, really historical. And as I said earlier, they contributed to 31 grievances. So it's no small feat to resolve that and to remove 31 grievances of the books, as it were, at the same time. So I think it's a real, good piece of work.
So everyone who should have been paid the right amount has now been paid. Thank you.
I believe so.
Thank you very much.
That's a really good positive assurance. Well, thank you for that. Lee, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll have no surprise that there's a volunteer crossover here, but it does affect paid staff as well. Obviously, the Trust commissioned Helen Vine's external review of community resilience. Now, the timing of that is, whilst the review was needed, the timing of that hasn't been great because of financial years and things like that. I just really want to seek assurance that when that report is received, if it hasn't been as yet, and I realise there's a crossover to the executive here, it will be reviewed in a timely manner, because I know there are staff in that department that are affected on secondment. The other assurance is that obviously there's bound to be some financial element that's been unbudgeted at this time, and whether that will be possible to be considered quite promptly if necessary as well. So really those two assurances, if there are, as to whether the report's been received or not.
You're quite right to say that there's a crossover. Can I say from a NED perspective, we will certainly hold the executive to account for that. On the financial resources, it is so difficult at the moment with the NHS. I can't make any promises on behalf of the executive. But Margaret, you're the executive.
Thank you. So thank you, Lee. We've been working very closely with Helen Vine, who's been doing that review. She actually came to EMB with both the head of the volunteer services now, Danny Dixon, and with Laura Waywell, the operational deputy director of operations, who is leading on this area. And they came and presented the findings. So we've only just received that report. So we haven't been able to bring it to subcommittee yet, but I can tell you, because of the way the review was held, we've actually been in conversation throughout. So there's some things that we're able to get in train immediately. So opposite from the previous report we've just been talking about, there is already an agreed plan and a way forward. We've now got the final report that's now being refined. We had further discussions at EMB, some really good challenge discussions around it. And yes, we look forward to progressing that at pace.
Please.
Thanks, Chair. My question is to Sue, and I suppose it's prefaced with, do you agree with this? And I'm sure you'll tell me if you don't, because you always do. I appreciate that the HR improvement plan is going to take time. Of course it is. But I wonder if you would agree that there's some early hits that could be made. And I'm thinking here about what I would call the culture of accountability. Now, I picked just at random out of the Integrated Quality Report, the report on employee sickness. And we see that sickness has been increasing for quite a long time, 4 or 5 dots on the graph. And the response is we are exploring other mechanisms to address sickness, absence, etc. We continue to explore approaches to managing long-term sickness, etc. Sickness is multifactorial, so further work has continued to understand the main causes, etc. Now, that to me is a culture of what I might call bureaucratic avoidance. And of course, those summaries are not written by the top people in the HR director, but they go across their desk before they get to the board. And I just wonder whether you'd agree that something needs doing here to get honest and helpful responses rather than, we continue to review. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And you're quite right. And again, another really good question. And yes, I would agree with you. Shock horror. We actually agree, Peter. So I think, we've talked about the fact that the HR improvement plan is going to take time to deliver. Yes, and we want to see some early signs and some quick wins to give us confidence and assurance that it's going in the right direction. underlying all of that, and I'm sorry to use the word again, but it is about culture. And it is about accountability, yes, but it's also about taking strong and decisive action when that is needed. So that has to be set at the top. So it starts from the board, but it also extends to the executive team and each of those executives. So in this space, yes, I would be looking to the chief people officer to set that tone around how people will be held accountable for these things. I think it is a work in progress, much like, if I'm also honest, the papers that come to People Committee. And the same question around focusing on risk and making sure those papers answer the right questions to give us the assurance that we need. And that has been a work in progress. It has improved since I have been chair of People Committee, and I think there has to be a relentless focus on accountability, but also in asking the right questions. You know, why are you bringing this here? What is happening about that? There is a BAF risk related to this. What are the mitigations? So how long will that take? When will you be able to report back to us that's delivered? And that takes time, because that is not the culture in which a number of those people have been operating. They have not been asked those questions. So I'm the chair from hell, generally speaking. But again, relentless message drives the improvement. So I think more work to be done is the honest answer. And hopefully we'll start to see changes in that narrative as well as in the metrics.
I don't think you're the chair from hell, so I think you're the chair from Constructive Challenge. Can I just say, you can't defend that. You've called something out there which I think is really salient. Can I just say that we will relay that challenge back? So thank you for doing so. Actually, thank you. I think we're still on target, which as chair always bothers me, to make sure that we comply with that. Can I move on to Howard now, who will provide his report on are we a sustainable partner? Howard, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll cover a few things from the report and also hand over to Paul to pick up some of the points on IT and digital. So in addition, as you have already heard, to a really good performance on the C2 mean, in addition to that, we are also on track, some 2 weeks off the year end, to meet our financial targets as well, of being in financial balance. So two really good things. Not only have we met or slightly exceeded the C2 mean, but we're also on target still to meet financial balance. So that's a really great performance. And so the focus is now on 25-26. Just picking up the point that Nick raised earlier on about that 10.2 million. That 10.2 million is in effect the same 10-odd million that we received this year. If you recall, we started the year with a 16.5 million deficit, and that 10 million that came in this year helped us achieve the financial balance. And as I say, for 25-26, that 10 million is effectively coming in again to help us achieve that balance. So that's what that was all about. What else? So the cybersecurity review has happened, and as I say, I'll just hand over to Paul in just a second to deal with that. And then the other points I wanted to raise were obviously the collaboration with SCAS, which has also been touched on, and also obviously the exit from the Recovery Support Programme. So yeah, overall, from a financial and performance perspective, a very good outcome. So I'll just hand over on the IT digital to Paul then.
Yep, okay. So I'll give you an update on cyber and on the digital strategy. So cyber, we do our normal tech checks every year, but this year we've had recently an ACE across the country did a much more detailed review of all the ambulance services cyber posture. So it's gone into a lot more detail. So not surprisingly, it's found a few things. And we're putting together a plan now, which is going to go to audit later this month on how those are going to be addressed. So you should always be worried about cyber because it's always moving. But we're in the middle of the pack. Some things we do well, some things we need to do better at. But it's always going to be like that with cyber. But the good news is it's a much more detailed review. So we understand our position a lot better. And we're putting together a plan of how to address those things. In terms of the digital strategy, we approved that at the board just before Christmas. And since then, there's been a lot of activity. A digital steering committee has been set up. They met 3 or 4 times now to prioritise all the work, because not surprisingly, there's more work than resources to deliver it, and things keep changing. So at the moment, the Digital Strategy Board are prioritising everything and putting together a plan. And again, the first draft of that's coming to FIC later in the month. But the steering board will continue to meet because things change all the time and priorities change as well. So I'm pleased about that. The other very good news is last week we appointed a permanent Chief Digital Officer, which is the first one we've ever had. So that's will be on the board, and that will really show how important this is. So I'm really pleased about that. We've had an interim person for the last year who's helped an awful lot, producing the strategy, setting up the steering committee, etc. But the permanent person starts on the 1st of April, and I think that will make a big, big difference. The other good thing that's happened recently is, if you remember, we had a number of incidents to do with our network going back a couple of years, and we've just had a very, very detailed review from British Telecom that's actually identified what the root cause is. I mean, you couldn't go into any more low level of detail if you tried. So it's quite difficult to understand it all. But they actually know exactly what's required, and that these fixes aren't going to take long, probably 4 or 5 weeks to do, and they're underway now. And so I'm really pleased about that. So again, that'll be able to update you on that at the next COG meeting. That hopefully that'll be finished. So all in all, an awful lot of work, but I think we're in a much better position. But we're not completely assured because we don't have our plan to deliver the digital strategy yet. But there's lots of work to put that in place. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That concludes your 2 presentations. May I open it to the floor? Martin, please.
Yes, at last I get the opportunity to ask Paul questions. I've been waiting for months. There's a load of big national and local projects either underway this year or planned or flipping over from one year to the next, such as nationally the Control Room Solutions and the National Mobilisation Application, and locally for the future things like cab renewal, MDT replacement, the Crawley and Medway connectivity. Are the NEDs assured about the progress against these programmes and projects for this year and for next? I know Paul might partly cover it by those that have been planned for next year as opposed to those that are tripping over from this year to next, but also about the programme and project management architecture that will determine success or failure and the resourcing of it.
Whoa, they're good questions, aren't they? So we are getting more assured, right? I think that the fact that we've got a new permanent person starting to head all this up is really important. So we need to give them a little time to settle, look at the digital strategy, which I think is pretty good actually, to be honest, and then look at the way we've prioritised. So lots of work in progress, so we're not assured yet, but we need to wait till this new person starts on the 1st of April, give them a couple of months, and then come back and try and answer. Whether we can answer all those questions, I don't know any organisation that's got all the capacity and all the different programme, every resource needed to deliver everything, you know, but at least we'll be able to set some priorities and make sure that we meet them. That would be the goal.
I mean, a couple of things. Are you assured that we're compliant with whatever the time frame is for the national projects that are laid down to us? Because, I mean, I think they were supposed to be completed, some of them by the end of March. So are we compliant nationally with what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I think we believe we are at the moment, yes.
Right. And secondly, in terms of the programme and project management. Obviously, the new person will come in, they'll have their own approach. But I know from talking to Simon in the past, there were capacity issues, I won't say capability issues, because I think it was a capacity issue, around programme and project management. I suppose the thing is there enough of it? Because, I mean, the default is, like I've seen this happen, trusts go out or organisations go out to the market and buy extremely expensive consultants who can do what people who... beg your pardon. Ignore that while I just try and work out how it stops. So I've got this new toy on my wrist. Anyway, yes, is there an issue about capacity? Because with programme project management obviously extends beyond the IT area. And whether actually, with whatever funding may be available next year, for actually resourcing that up, because you can have as good a technical people as you like, but you need the people who know things like MSP and Prince2 and Agile and all these other things.
It's a very good question, and you're absolutely right. At the moment, we've got 4 contractors running the programme office, which is a new thing for us within the digital department. So they're there for the next 3 or 4 months. I think we need to look at whether or not that resource is required permanently. I suggest it is, but this is the first time we've had a strategy, and the first time we're actually putting a plan together to implement it. Out of that will come our priorities and the resourcing gaps, which there almost certainly will be, or there'll be compromises to be made, which is what prioritisation is all about.
Because one of the dodgy things that happens is, like, I used to have a team of, at its height, 10 project managers when I was head of programme management. And, you know, you could staff half of that team with the cost of one management consultant that you took on for longer than you should do. You know, and it actually can be a false economy not to take in-house sufficient professionals and then end up paying a lot more money than you need to by going to, I won't name them, certain people who specialise in offering you whatever you're prepared to pay for a very large fee, temporarily.
Agree entirely, yeah.
Thank you. Not any other questions of Peter?
Sorry, Chair, I think we're being the nuisance corner. That's why you'll have to split us up next time. In the last COG, under this heading, I raised a question about the Trust's involvement with the ICS, with the system, because it seemed to fit under the sustainable partner bit of it, and also bearing in mind that's also one of the governor's responsibilities now is to keep an eye on that. And the minutes say that Simon assured that collaboration is necessary due to variations, that it will not result in, sorry, reading the wrong bit, they're deeply embedded in conversations within the Sussex system and will provide a summary of these efforts. And my understanding of that is under this report we would get a little sort of subheading that listed any significant involvements with the system, and I just wondered whether that had got lost somewhere in the recording of the minutes.
Correct. I mean, the heading of this is that we're a good system partner, and what you're saying is we're not reporting to you on how well we're doing on that. I mean, I've got a view on this, and I'm sure Karen is as well, but I would.
It's a good point. Maybe we ought to pick up and have a separate section, as you suggest, because we haven't at the moment. But I'll hand over to Karen.
It's a good point, and we will take that on board because it isn't that explicit. I mean, I'll just give you the assurance that I'm relatively new to this, but I've already had engagement with 3 of the chairs of the ICB. We've got meetings set up, and one of them I know particularly well from a professional capacity. Karen mentioned that we are represented on the Committee in Common for Sussex. There are the normal interactions that the Chief Executive will have across all of the ICBs. I think we are in a better position because of our financial position, particularly with our lead commissioner. But our interaction with the partners is quite extensive. I am assured on that, but I will let Margaret give a bit more detail.
No, I think that's a really good challenge as we look at how the BAF will look going forward, actually. So we have an exec lead for each of the system, for each of the counties, and we are in every provider collaborative. So each of those systems have got a provider collaborative. We're in those. We're also involved in the Surrey Heartlands as our lead commissioner in the review of all its services that are going on there. We obviously also have our collaboration with SCAS, but we also have the South of England, all these acronyms, honestly, the South of England Ambulance Service, and in fact Simon is the chair of that. We set out the governance map for the systems and CCAM and the providers about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and so we do have a ICS Quality Collaborative, we have a commissioning group, and we have the Chief Executives group that they report into, and we also have a third group which is around performance. And we are a success representative on those in the right portfolio boxes. We have our operating, we've already appointed 2 of the 3 divisional directors now. We are going out to advert internally this week for the 3rd divisional director, and if not successful, we'll go externally. But those divisional directors, as in their current roles, are already plugged into system-based groups, and our operating unit managers, of course, are in the local A&E boards. So we are very much plugged into the systems now. And as I said, nationally with the Ambulance Association, out of the 8 boards, 3 of them are chaired by CCAM executives. So the influence we can exert is really, we're in a different position than we were in 2 years ago, and are really beginning to see the fruits of that and having conversations now that absolutely makes sense for the urgent emergency pathway and the massive part the ambulance service has in that, not in a patient's journey, because it's actually quite small in a patient's journey, but in the oversight of the system. We are the only ones that can in-reach in every single provider. So we have the map for that. We can provide that map if that's helpful so you can see it. But I don't see how we could be any more embedded now. And we could also bring back the provider collaborative information. That's actually quite interesting because every county is dealing with it very differently.
I don't always want to follow on when you get a response from one of the NEDs or executive, but just to give you, it's a really good question and give you the assurance that I can take. I mean, I've been around CCAM for a number of years now. We were a very inward-focused organisation. What I think we're doing now, from my perspective, is, shouting above our weight, if that's the right expression. We have got a lot to offer in terms of system redesign, and what I'm really pleased to see is the way in which we are really engaging with our system partners. Are we in demand from them? I think we are. We could be a bit more. I think we're trying to educate them what we can give, but it's a really good challenge, and perhaps we ought to look at the way in we report back to the council so that we can give you that assurance. So thank you. That's a really good challenge. Can I ask any other question? Kirsty, please.
So mine is completely shifting target. I think it is to you, Howard. So the NHS Procurement Act came into effect on the 24th of February. Are the NEDs assured that we are compliant to it, bearing in mind where we've been with our procurement across the trust? Because actually we've not been in a good place. We're working towards it, but I just want some assurance that we are actually compliant to the Act, because it is now in place.
Thank you. Yes, no, I'm well aware of that, and there has been a plan dating back a number of months, if not longer, to make sure that we are compliant. So I will double check, given that it's now in place, but the plan was for it to various actions on that plan to ensure that we were compliant. So thank you for the question, but I'm pretty sure we are, but I will take it away and make sure that we are fully compliant as per plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you. Karen, do you want to?
Thank you. Yes, just a recent example about extending our involvement in collaboration. Michael alluded to the meeting we've been going to on the committee in common. I was very interested to see when I was looking at the papers for that the acute collaborative work to date had not involved CCAM at all. So we did suggest that it might be helpful, and we did have something to contribute to that work, and that was acknowledged. So I think the point about the collaboration is it's a two-way process. So I think there is something about the way in which, and I know Margaret's doing the same from the example she's given, is helping people to recognise what we might be able to contribute. And I think my sense was that was taken up in good faith. So that was just a recent example.
I think not to hog this, but what I was impressed with, I mentioned that Margaret and colleagues were at, and I attended briefly earlier in the week, the ambulance conference for senior managers and chief executives of the ambulance sector. What I was impressed with was the quality of the speakers who were there from central government. I hate to say NHS England, given what's just been announced, but there were representatives there, but also the department. And I think all of them were, and I don't think they were just playing to the gallery, a recognition nationally of the contribution that the ambulance service can make to some of the significant challenges that the NHS faces going forward. So we need to, well, we are building on that, and we will continue to do so, but it's a really good challenge, actually. Can I check, any other questions for Howard and Paul? Okay. No, thank you very much. I did say at the very beginning of this, Ray, you asked a really important question about, you know, can we be confident that we are making appropriate progress with the strategy? And I said I'd come back to that. So I was just talking to Peter that each of the assurance reports that you get, you know, on quality of care, people, and then finance and partnership working are really the main components of the strategy. Having heard the conversations, I think what you hear is that there are, not surprisingly, some issues that are out there, and they will remain. Most organisations face ongoing issues. I hope you get the impression that the scrutiny, or not the impression, you see that the scrutiny of those areas is very thorough. But I am struck by your question. I'm not sure whether that in itself gives you the assurance as the Council of Governors that we are making progress with the strategy. And can we take that away and looking for future meetings, how we can come back and give you that wider perspective of the strategy is going. I'm confident we are moving very much in the right direction, but I'd like to be able to convince you all of that as well. So we'll take that away. Any other business? I think we have concluded.
We have, yeah.
Thank you. The only other business I've got, and thank you for your perseverance, it's the first time I've chaired one of these meetings, but I did miss one issue item, which was an apology for absence. So Max, one of our NED colleagues, is not here today. He did send his apologies to me and to the Secretariat. He is Vice Chair of a governing body of a university, and they've got their away day to that today, and that's the reason why he is not here. And Moshan, who should be here today, I think it's annual holiday she's got at the moment, but she did give us advance notice that she couldn't attend today's meeting of the Council of Governors. So that's the any other business I've missed. But Peter, anything else?
No, and we've received no questions from members of the public either. So
okay. And Andrew.
Yeah, Chair, could I it's just an administrative point actually. The IQR report is obviously only up until the end of December. So council are being sometimes being asked questions where things might have improved, and actually we might be better if we could see the most up-to-date reports, not one that might have been sort of floating around in the system for, in this case, 2 months.
So, good point. Two things to say on that. First is that this is the most current integrated quality report. They're produced on a bi-monthly basis in time for our board meeting. So this was the report that came to our board in February. The next one will be established for the next meeting in April. So this is the most recent report that we have. The second thing I'll just say, because we have discussions around this on board around the sort of timing of data, and what we've said there, and I think it applies to this question, is that the way the IQR is designed through these the SPC charts is that the board is, and therefore the council should be looking more kind of over time. So the fact that it isn't quite up to date in terms of a month or two old, it shouldn't matter in terms of the questions or the scrutiny that both the board and the council.
No, I completely understand that, but if one takes Hear and Treat as an example, we should now be at 16% according to the graph. We're still at 14-ish. So I think that's an example of where actually the most up-to-date data either stops the question because we've reached the target, or we haven't reached the target, therefore, guess what, we might ask a question. So that was my point, Peter, but I completely accept if this is the most up-to-date, then that's where it is. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just come in on Hear and Treat, because I had a separate conversation with Harvey. Not achieving the target is not always the issue. So our percentage, and I relate exactly to Hear and Treat, is our volume of demand has exceeded our budgeted expectations. So our percentage of Hear and Treat is of a higher volume of patients. So I think we just have to get that into perspective as well. So we have to see what our demand is, what our budget was, and then what our percentage is. And I think we see that at year end as well.
I think on that particular point, that's an extremely useful comment to understand the context, but I don't remember reading that in the narrative in the report. So if it was in the report, we wouldn't have all been thinking we're still off the target. So that's where the actual narrative is so important, rather than the plain vanilla numbers. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's spot on. And thank you, Liz, for giving that clarification. Thank you very much. Okay, unless there are any other questions, I would like to spot board effectiveness of this meeting, and this is really important because we are a learning organisation. I really want to stress that. Did this meeting meet your expectations? Was there anything that you would like? I mean, there are some things that came out, I think, that we can take away and build on. Martin, please.
Yes, I thought the balance was much better in this meeting between the NED reports and all the rest of it. I mean, in a number of the other, going back in time, we've had sort of lengthy presentations and sort of like lengthy discussions about governors, development meetings, all the rest of it. And then when it's got into questioning the NEDs, I have on occasions felt we've been trying to gallop through it as quickly as possible, or being galloped through it. Whereas this time I felt that it was appropriately paced, because my initial reaction when I saw the agenda was, oh, it's in the wrong order again. We should have the NED stuff up first, so if something's crowded out, it's not that. So this has worked well, but just for the future, it might not work well if the first part of it takes a lot longer.
Okay, so let's look at that going forward so that we get the balance right. I would, I'm not saying that all the work that you do is not important, but I think that the key role you have is to hold to account, so we must need to focus on those scrutiny reports. But Kirsty, please.
So probably the agenda, interestingly, the agenda hasn't changed. I think something has changed in the way we've had the discussions potentially, because if I look at the agenda, it's exactly the same. It follows the same. It's just been switched around. But actually, I think the conversations have been better today. So therefore, I think I've got more out of the council today than I probably would have, because 9 times out of 10 it always feels like we rush through the 3 areas when actually those are the areas that we should be concentrating on and doing. Yeah. And actually, the fact that there was like 30 minutes allocated and we had significantly longer on the quality, I'm sure Liz felt like it was a squad of some sort, I won't say what. But I'm sure Liz felt there was a lot of scrutiny on that committee, whereas Howard got a slightly lesser interrogation aspect. But I do think it's been significantly better, and I'm just wondering whether, as a council, and I know we've got a lot of new governors here today, but I think as a council we're probably maturing and learning very similar to, I think, like a lot of things, the organisation's changing. I think our questions have been different, so therefore they've allowed for better conversation.
Well, we're learning together. And the one thing I'd say is you do learn. I mean, that response that Liz gave about volume influencing, I hadn't realised that. So that that was very good, actually. So we're all learning together. That's really, really positive.
Could I make
Please.
just one point? And it was something you said, Martin, when you was saying, kind of tongue in cheek, you've been waiting for a long time to ask Paul some questions, and it just made me think that you know, like all board members, actually, non-exec directors are equally accountable for the performance of the organisation. So, although we lead off by committee chairs, and perhaps we should change that around from time to time, to help start the conversation, you should all feel comfortable by asking any director. So, you know, Paul might not be here next time, then Neds won't be able to make every meeting, but that shouldn't prevent you from asking questions about areas you think are their kind of areas of expertise. So if Paul wasn't here, you should be able to ask any other Ned on those assurance questions around digital and IT, for example, because, as I say, each Ned is equally accountable.
Martin.
Yeah, I mean, thank Peter's just jogged my memory about the other thing. I think one of the, I've mentioned this before, issues in the past is we haven't had like a dedicated hook on which to have a conversation about the digital. Because if the Finance and Performance Committee has got such a big brief, we tend to, and I'm responsible for this as much as anybody else, focus on Howard and the finances. But there needs to be something. There needs to be something. I think that that report needs to be bigger because it's got a bigger space to cover. Do you see what I mean? It's maybe 2 pages from Howard or whatever isn't a sufficient length, maybe, as opposed to having a separate report. I mean, Paul needs to do an addendum to it or something, just so we don't lose the conversation on the digital because we focus in on the sort of the big thing. Well, it is the big thing, but it kind of like tends to dominate everything else, which is the money.
Okay, can I say one thing on that? It's a really interesting point. So the national discussion, and Simon and I were talking about this because it's coming back from the ICB. The real emphasis, as we've all heard in the press, is around productivity. Now, productivity will be enhanced, I think, by digital. So perhaps there needs to be, and I'll leave it, you know, it's not my place to, it's for Peter as head of governance to look at, but perhaps that report needs to have a separate section on digital, you know, that would enable you then to have that ongoing discussion. And so we'll take that away. Very helpful. Thank you. Okay, I think that's the end. Our next meeting is on the 19th of June. This afternoon, after lunch, we have a meeting in private, but I think now we have lunch. Is that right?
Lunch next door, and then back at 1:30 for part 2.
Yeah, thank you very much. But thank you all for your contribution today. Thank you.